I'm your co-host, Dr. Dustin Portela, a board-certified dermatologist and physician content creator on all social media platforms. I'm joined by my co-host, Mimi Banks. Mimi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
So today we're going to be diving into the process of ideating and creating content, how we get the ideas that will later become our content.
And I'm so passionately curious about how you come up with content, how creators continuously come up with content and are so creative. It's really something that never ceases to amaze me.
Even as a content creator myself, as I, scroll Instagram or TikTok, sometimes I'm just amazed at the creativity that people express in completely different genres. And it just fascinates me and inspires me to be more creative in my process.
Is it ever overwhelming to you? Just do you feel that pressure of like, I need to post, I need to create, or is it just constantly coming?
I'm always trying to think and jot things down. I, always keep a sticky pad by my computer at work or just a little note on my phone where I can put things in. And, at this point, I also have members of my team that will send me ideas from time to time. So there's a pretty constant stream of ideas coming from either me or from others. But, in the beginning, it's a very different process and it takes some, creativity and persistence. You really have to be persistent. You have to enjoy the process of it. And I've really enjoyed the process of content creation and almost like a performance, so to speak. And we mentioned this on, an earlier episode that I was never a theater guy. I did a little band in middle school, but I was, kind of no performing arts whatsoever in high school or college, because I just wanted to do sports and academics. And so the discovery of this as an interest for me has been really fun.
I mean, you're an absolute natural. You found your calling. Like it's so surprising to me that you didn't have a theater background, but I think also we did talk about the fact of going to performances when you were younger and just constantly being in that world of, I'm going to say quote unquote entertainment or having theater around you. So now when we're talking about content, when we started social media and when I started MB Social 10 years ago, it was really about pictures. Social media was sharing pictures. It was like it was now what we call a photo dump, but it was photo albums. Now we go to social for the actual content. You follow people because maybe you're part of their community. Maybe you're seeking advice. Maybe you want entertainment. But either way, you're going to a channel the same way you would maybe television for that entertainment, or the same reason people are tuning into our podcast because they have a goal. They know what they're getting. And when you're thinking about content, do you think about format? Do you think about subject? How do you think about content?
Yeah. So I always try to start with my audience, who I'm speaking to, and what kind of questions might be on their mind. And my audience, my avatar, the person in my mind that I'm speaking to is kind of a middle-aged woman with a couple children at home, makes some of the financial decisions for her family. She's concerned about her skin and some anti-aging, and maybe one of her teenagers has some acne. And so I try to think about what might be on that person's mind and how can I reach them? How can I speak to them? How can I get their attention so that they would trust my recommendations and learn from me and hopefully be, somewhat entertained by the content that I produce, because I like to be a little silly and goofy at times.
And that's the hook. The entertainment part is what keeps people coming back. And you mentioned what they're looking for. How do you know, what is the signal to you that content is working?
This is where we get into engagement in likes, comments, follows, things like that. Those are the superficial metrics. And that's the stuff that most people can see. They can see how many followers you have, how many likes your videos are getting, how many comments and shares your video is getting. Because when you're scrolling on TikTok or Instagram, you can see that on the side of the video. You can see how many times it's been shared or saved. And those types of things are signals to the platforms and their algorithm that this content is interesting to a particular type of person, because every platform has a profile on us. They know probably more about us than we understand. And then it will take that content and say, these kind of people liked it, and it will show it to more people that are like that because they want to increase their time on the platform. So when I'm looking for what, is going to do that, then we can also dive into more specific and private analytics on a video. So if you've posted a video, you can look at the analytics on that video where you can get the percentage of the video that was watched. So if you put up a 20-second video and it got, 1,000 views, but then you look your average watch time was only 3 seconds, that tells you people are scrolling away from your video. They're not staying for the full message. And that might encourage you to come up with a better hook on your video. You can also see how many new followers you got from a specific video on Instagram. So those are some of the back end metrics. And those are things when you create for a brand, they like to see those back end metrics. It's really common after a campaign has wrapped up, they want to see 10, 14 days later, those back end analytics to understand if the video that you created was successful in promoting their brand. So there's the superficial metrics that anybody can see and the back end metrics, and that helps to tell you how your content is doing.
And I think that that's part of it because I think that there are two sides of it, and we'll talk into more about ideating, but really once you have those ideas and you share them to make sure that they resonate because you could have tons and tons and tons of ideas, but you really want to make sure that they're actually resonating with the people you're sharing with.
Right. And sometimes you might put out something and it could get great engagement, but then you look at the comments and maybe all of them are critical because you misspoke on something, or it turns out it hit the complete wrong audience that you weren't reaching for. And that can be, a time to course correct, or maybe you followed a trend on social media with a sound or an idea and it got you a lot of followers, likes, or views, but that's not really your core content, and you might have gotten a lot of followers that don't want to listen to you talk about health, for example. And so that kind of stuff can be tempting and it looks great and it feels good. It gives you that dopamine rush initially, but it may not always serve your goals as a content creator.
So actually, I wanted to talk about a few things that you mentioned. The first thing, what we started about was your target audience. Who are you talking to? And you mentioned something else, your goal. It's very easy to know what the shortcut is. We know that memes work. We know that entertaining content works, but exactly as you said, then people are going to come back and just expect meme accounts. Then all of a sudden, when you go back into your educational content, they're going to be confused and probably fall off when they see educational content. So let's go back for a second and really think about if we're talking about, so now you've decided who your audience is, what you're looking for, what you should actually post about. So you talked about keeping a list of ideas. How do you ideate? Where do those ideas come from? How can somebody start those ideas? If they're just like blank page, what do I do?
This, for me, comes in several different buckets. So the first is my clinic. I still practice as a dermatologist 4 days a week, and I'm seeing, 40 patients a day on those days. And so it becomes very easy to see what kind of questions are people coming up with, because that's an extra 40 sets of eyes and ears that are consuming information online through TV, through magazines. And they may be bringing in a skincare product that I've never heard of before and saying all their friends are using it. And that might be a prompt for me to look at this new company or this new product. Or I might see that all of a sudden everybody is, putting potatoes on their pimples on social media, and a patient might mention that to me. So the first bucket is, what are the questions that my patients are asking me? And if I'm getting similar questions routinely throughout the week, that's probably something that's going to become a video for me, or something very unique comes into my clinic. And that might be something that, hey, people don't really know about this thing. And if I can put information out about it, it might reach somebody that was suffering from this condition. So my patient population serves as a great focus for content ideation. The second, of course, is just scrolling social media. Of course, I follow most other doctors and a lot of news accounts. I tend to follow, other influencers as well. And you'll start to see themes that they're talking about. And it might give you ideas on how you could pull that into your niche and your genre to discuss whether it's health and wellness or skincare or whatever it is. And sometimes I will get on news sites and look at what's trending, what's going on in pop culture, because sometimes it can be helpful to pull in a Kardashian story with something about, plastic surgery, because those are going to catch people's attention. When you attach something that's known, like a celebrity, to something that's unknown, or a topic you want to talk about, it's more likely to reach a bigger audience. It's the known and the unknown, putting them together and creating that familiarity. Sometimes I'll have, ideas and I'll put them into Chat GPT and have it help me break them down into many more subtopics, because it's in under 10 seconds, you can take 2 or 3 sentences of ideas and get 20 short form video ideas out of that.
Wait, can you talk about hold on a second. Let's talk about that for just 1 second. What do you do with ChatGPT? Because I think this is again, we talked about this before, but AI, an untapped nest. Let me start again. We talked about this just in a recent episode, but AI and how can you tap into it? Are there prompts? Do they give you something that's actually usable? How does that work?
Yeah. So I have gone to ChatGPT many times. And, if I want to talk about acne, for example, I might ask ChatGPT. And I try to give it as much information about me and my audience as possible. All right. You pretend that you're a board certified dermatologist and you're going to be speaking to an audience that looks like, like middle-aged women, for example, who have children that have acne. And I want you to give me 10 common misconceptions about caring for acne. And it will give you 10 common misconceptions. And it might say, scrubbing your face really hard will help to cure acne. And so that can become a video idea. It might say, using baking soda and lemon from the pantry at home is a remedy for acne, or toothpaste. And that's 2 more video ideas that you can get on. And you can say, busting myths about acne today. Some people will turn to their bathroom drawer and pull out the toothpaste. Here's why that's a bad idea. So it can just kind of give you, a way to get a hook, a way to take an idea and break it down into many more parts. And it's really easy to use. There's free versions of ChatGPT, or you can pay for it and have unlimited access.
Fascinating. So I know that there was one more area that you talked about. So we talked about looking into your audience. So understanding specifically people who come into the clinic, your patients, what are they asking about? What are they curious about? We looked at trends. We looked at social media. What are your colleagues posting about? What is the general community posting out at large? Chat GPT. And then what was the last one that you said?
The last one is your audience on social media. So every time you post a video, you should, a day or two later, uh, you know, jump back into the comments and see what kind of follow up questions people are asking. All of the platforms have tools to take and create a video immediately from a comment. And you could do that, or you could just use that as a prompt in a future video. So you've got to look at your comments. You can also look at comments on accounts similar to yours. So I might be on the comment section for a video of another dermatologist, and I can see, hey, they posted about this. The video did really well. Here's the common questions that people are asking them as a follow up. That's something that I could talk about. And then you get direct messages as well through these platforms. And it's not feasible to answer every direct message, but if you see something come in, that could be a video idea. And I've got a whole series on my channels where I just screenshot a question. I remove the person's name for their privacy, and I'll read the question and I'll answer it, because if one person is asking that question, probably many more people have a similar question.
And that's actually directly speaking to your audience. So it's taking your expertise and spitting it back out. Because I think what's interesting about being a medfluencer, no matter what field of medicine you're in, is that you have this level of expertise that the common person does not have. And so to be able to have that access to you and to provide that information and that access to education is huge.
Yeah. And, they can be simple videos. You don't have to write out long scripts. Some people prefer to ad lib and just kind of fly off the cuff. Some people like to script it out, or at least do bullet points. I'm kind of a bullet point person. I don't like to read a script on my videos, but I will, pause, and I'll look at a bullet point and then come back to the camera, and you edit out the pauses in between, and it looks really natural.
The final question I'm very curious about, what do you think about social media holidays? So you have Skin Cancer Awareness Month, National Vitamin C Day, which are seemingly very brand appropriate for your brand. But then you have Best Friends Day, National Sons Day, and there's literally a calendar. There's probably at least like 500 holidays every single day. What is your point of view on sharing that kind of content?
It's fun to do sometimes. I think it can be helpful to mix up your content a little bit, as long as you're not straying too far out of your genre, your niche. So, you can do that from time to time. I have not really made it a priority in my content. Every once in a while I'll remember, but I am kind of a batch content recorder. And if I, show up to work and I find out it's National Donut Day, I probably don't have the time to create a post about donuts, for example, and get that up and posted. So, if I'm not aware of it beforehand and intentionally try to create content for a specific holiday, then it's probably not going to happen in my workflow where I batch content and then I schedule everything to be posted.
And another question that or something else that I'm very curious about, you were talking about batch content. So there's a few ideas here too, is that if you have a series of content, for example, you talked about with ChatGPT, how you're going to ask about acne. Would you attack that all at once and you just create the content?
Yeah, I would, because when I'm, sitting down, I want to record that all. That doesn't mean that it's all going to get posted back to back. We may decide to post 2 or 3 acne videos, 2 or 3 reaction videos, 2 or 3 videos about eczema, and then come back to more acne videos. So if you're consistently posting about one topic, it's not likely that all of those videos are going to do really well, in my opinion, at least. So I like to and kind of keep going back and forth between different topics. I don't want to become a channel that's only one topic.
And so that's what I was going to ask about is that when you're thinking about your content and how you diversify it, how do you establish, are there certain guardrails that you're thinking about? Do you have um, brand guidelines for yourself, brand pillars that you say, okay, I want to make sure I cover these 5 areas and I cycle through them?
I will talk about anything that is related to dermatology, skincare, health, wellness, longevity. So I cover a lot of those contents. I guess you could say those are my pillars, but it's a really broad range of things that can fit inside those. And it's easy to, kind of cross between those pillars. You can talk about how, health and wellness, how proper sleep quality can impact your eczema, for example, or how your diet might impact your acne. So you can try to draw in people that follow more in the health and wellness space into your skincare space and try to mix those audiences a little bit.
And the other thing I think that's interesting, your approach to content is that you create content versus curating. And so there are two vastly different approaches. So we're speaking to Dr. Portela as a creator. He creates, he shares his own videos. There's also a trend, um, and in beginning medfluencers where people are curating. And we were just talking about this earlier about someone who thought that they had very strong content and half of the content was screenshots or not even reposting or just putting up images that to them that was content. So I think it's important to also think about the kind of content, the quality of content, or just that content approach.
Yeah, if you want to just do a screenshot, I think everybody needs to or I think everybody needs to lead with their own face and their own voice when it comes to content. And so, for example, November is commonly known as like Men's Health Month. And we talk about prostate cancer awareness, men's mental health. And for that, I decided to put up a post about men's mental health and make specific book recommendations that I've read or that I've recommended to people. But instead of just screenshot the books and put up pictures, which is not going to get a lot of attention, I put my face first and I used a green screen to bring up each of those books and talk about why they were important to me. So it keeps me front and center, and it's a little bit different content for my audience. So, those videos didn't do quite as well, but it's a topic that was important to me and it still fits within the mold or within my content pillars. So I still think people need to lead with themselves. And the day, may come where you have great influence and all you need to do is post a book cover and people will go buy it. But I think as you're starting out, you need to continue to put yourself out there first so people can get to know you. And also it helps you get better in your content creation process.
I agree. Even from an agency perspective, when we're creating content, we constantly ask ourselves, who are we targeting? What are we targeting? And my team sometimes posts pictures of me and or content of me. And I I'm camera friendly, but also I don't want it to be about me. But it was interesting because we just went through a content recap to see what performs best. And it's always the faces that are outstanding, the faces that speak louder than anything else, because that's what people can relate to.
Yeah, and I have a friend who is a influencer in her own right here in my community and would do, restaurant visits, hotel visits, new businesses in town. And for the first 2 or 3 years that I knew her, her face never went on the platform. It was all about the business and had a good following and decent engagement. And at some point in the process, she decided to start putting herself on there, even though she was not really that interested in being on camera. And as she did that, her follower count exploded and people got to associate her with the work that she was doing. They saw the face behind the brand. She got better engagement. She delivered better results for the brands that the companies, the restaurants, the hotels that she was working with. And she's grown to a point where now she shares personal opinions about local political topics or things going on. And she's developed a really powerful platform for herself and for her followers, where her recommendations are much more trusted now than when she was just posting a walkthrough video that did not show her face of a new restaurant.
So actually that you bring something up, I think that's very important when it's about content. As a medical professional, as somebody that has um, a certified degree in an area of medicine, showing your face, being in a lab coat when you're talking about anything medical related has a huge impact on the people that you're talking to.
Yeah, how you appear on camera. And when you're just starting out, I typically wear scrubs and they've got my name on them. I think generally it's pretty easy to tell that I'm a doctor, but sometimes I will throw on the white coat. I never wear it in clinic. So I only am in my white coat if I'm on video, or doing a photo shoot, for a brand or something. But you want to portray that expertise because when you're just getting started and nobody knows who you are, if they're scrolling and they see something about, cardiovascular disease and there's a doctor in a white coat there, they're more likely to stop and pay attention because there's an expected level of credibility when you do that. And it can be a good idea as you're getting started.
I think so, and I think just remembering your expertise and what you know is so much more than the average person. And so to you, even if it's super basic, the average person on social media will want to know. And something that I learned from Dustin in an earlier episode is when you're thinking about content, it doesn't have to be complex. It should be third grade level.
Yeah, you can't assume that people know, the complicated words and descriptions that we use. And the greater that you can break that down, even if it means you're going to split something up into more than one video, that's usually going to do better for you and for your audience.
And that's actually something else too. What about series? So maybe you have an idea. I'm going to go back to acne because that's a good one. Is that you say, all right, I want to talk about acne in whatever format that you want to talk about it in. Is to maybe think about how do you do a series, and maybe you do a format. What is it? How to treat it? How to prevent it? My favorite products for it. This kind of regimen for it, and you can start to think about all. You can take an area and start to treat it in a very similar way. And then you can take another skin disease like psoriasis and think about the same thing. What do you think about having a format like that?
Yeah, I think it's a very good idea. And social media creation tools like green screen videos where you can pull up a picture as you talk about it, make it very easy and really help to make it more understandable to a common audience so that you can spend a video talking about the different types of acne from whiteheads to blackheads to papules and pustules and cysts. And that's a video. And then you could talk about cleansers for acne, foaming cleansers, gentle cleansers, exfoliating cleansers. And then you can talk about topical treatments, salicylic acid versus benzoyl peroxide, a video on benzoyl peroxide versus retinol. So you can really break that up and tie it all into a series on acne. But unless you're doing a long form YouTube video, putting all of that into a short form video that's now going to push to be 90 seconds to 2 minutes, you're probably not going to retain your audience.
Right. So keeping it simple is important. And then the last question I wanted to find out about. So we spoke about finding about the community, really staying in your lane, educating, and focusing on the area of medicine, but how do you know when to integrate trends? How do you say, okay, I'm going to hop onto this one. My platform is very serious. I'm not that kind of person. I'm not super trendy, but this one kind of speaks to me. I'm not going to dance, but I kind of want to do this one, the potato, um, the using the potato that you mentioned earlier. That one I think is kind of funny. I want to try it. Like, how do you know when to use it and when not to use it?
Yeah, this is a little bit trial and error, and you're going to find things out as you try it. So I would say don't be scared to try trends. Don't be scared to use trending audios, but always try to pull it into your genre in some way. And so if everybody's just doing a dance on a video and every video is going viral, and you just do the dance with the video in your clinic, it doesn't really say a lot about you. But early on TikTok, I would do a lot of trends and put a dermatology twist on it. So my first viral video, it was a gunshot sound and people were cleaning their mirrors with Windex. I used my liquid nitrogen gun to freeze warts. And so I pulled it in. It showed people I'm a dermatologist. It saw that I had a sense of humor. And that was the first video that went viral for me. But it helped to grow an audience. Many of them are still with me to this day, 5 years later. So
We just talked about for a second staying in your lane. I'm very excited about the burning questions I ask you because you stay in your lane so well. I tell people I never know what your preference is, chocolate or vanilla ice cream. So I'm learning so much about you. But because it's important to stay in your lane and because it's important when you're thinking about content to talk about things that are relevant, how do you decide what to post, what not to post? And how do you stay in your lane?
yeah, so this is an important thing as a physician. And when you're creating content in your genre, you want to foster trust with your audience in the same way that you would foster trust with patients that are coming to see you. And so when a patient comes to see me, I live in a very red state. We have a lot of people that have moved here from California that tend to be more blue. So when we're talking politics, I have patients that are all over the political spectrum. But they're welcome to share their views with me, and I love to listen and learn from them. I appreciate when I'm challenged on my views and like to think I'm open minded enough to change my views. But my patients don't need to know what my views are because if all of a sudden I make it very obvious that I'm on a different side of the political aisle than they might be, that is a potential to compromise trust in their care. And that's not what I want to do. And so I do not get into politics. I do not get into religion. I do not get into, controversial topics, that are going on throughout the world because it's not going to make people trust me more because ultimately I am a physician, I am an educator, and if I lose trust in half of the population, then potentially they're not going to get good information that I could have otherwise provided them. And so it's very tempting to dip your toes into things and oftentimes we find that the media will take a story and give us incorrect information or they might get a story out with accurate information, but they don't have all the information that might come out later. So I advise people that are getting into the content creation game to avoid dipping their toes into those topics. And if you are going to dip your toes into those topics, make sure that you have complete information about it and just be prepared that some people may not appreciate that and may choose to unfollow you or may choose not to see you in your clinic. And unfortunately, in the world today, because anybody can go and leave you a Google review, you could piss off people and they might, bomb your practice reviews. And that's not something that you want to subject yourself to is if you have a 4.9 star rating for your clinic and you make people mad on the other side of the world, and they could take you down to a 2 star rating, that's going to impact your livelihood in your community. So I just don't think it's worth it to get into that game. I like to stick to my lane when it comes to health, wellness, skincare, dermatology, and sometimes some fitness content, motivational content, things like that, because it fits what I do. It's widely applicable and is what I have found develops trust in the messages that I want to share, specifically when I make product recommendations.
And I think that that's one of the valuable insights, one of the most valuable insights on today's episode is, and I fully believe that this is also why brands like to partner with you because you are that trusted resource, because also you're in it for the right reason. So if you're creating content and sticking to that objective of you want to educate or you want to pass X, Y, and Z message as a physician or as a medical professional, then your opinion about what's happening in the world is actually not really relevant.
I agree with you. You can talk about it at the Thanksgiving dinner table if you want, but leave it off social media, in my opinion.
It's just the risk is really greater than the reward at this point, and also it has such large implications.
Yeah.
Not no political opinions, no even mentioning chocolate or vanilla ice cream. This is why we go back to those burning questions.
Yeah, I'll dip my toes in the water on that one, and it's Rocky Road ice cream.
See, there you go. There you go. Did not know this. Did not know this. So I learned so much today about how. Let me hold on, let me go back again because I took notes for a second. I make sure. So When thinking about content, it can be super overwhelming. I wanted to share back a few points that I took away and that I specifically learned about coming up with content ideas. A lot of it's right in front of you. First, what are your patients asking you? Second, what is your audience talking about? Third, what are people in your industry doing? Fourth, what are influencers and the world around you talking about? Five, check out Chat GPT. Six, just check out the calendar. Is it Skin Cancer Awareness Month? Can you talk about something that is in your lane? Remember, stay in your lane.